I want to introduce the lovely Maia, who's one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement in Exeter and an all-round inspirational activist. If you didn't see Maia's talk this afternoon, I mean, the whole group were just kind of stunned by Maia's honesty and vulnerability, but also your strength, Maia. And yeah, we just really appreciated you sharing your journey and your experiences. So really want to say thank you. At any point tonight, Maia, if you don't want to ask a question. If you don't want to answer a question, if you've answered it so many times before that you've so fed up with it, or you just feel uncomfortable answering anything, then just tell me to shut up and I will. We want this to be an educational experience, but not at your comfort. So yeah, I just thought I'd preface it with that. So Maia, I wondered if you'd want to kind of introduce yourself, give people a bit of context for those that didn't see the talk, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, perfect. So hi, I'm Maia, I'm 21. I'm a Black Lives Matter activist in Exeter and across Devon. I co-organised the first Black Lives Matter protest in Exeter, which had over 1,000 attending. And I'm co-founder of the LM Exeter movement, which is our continuous group since we did the protest. I'll just give you a background of me. I moved to Devon when I was about 9 years old from London. So obviously when I first moved here, there was a bit of a culture shock and a huge difference in diversity. I realized that I was no longer seeing people that look like me anymore, and I was questioned by everyone here in the society that we have here as to why I looked the way that I did, why I acted the way that I did, why I had a different culture to them. So I was made to feel very uncomfortable in an area that needed to be my home, because at that choice I had no say in where I lived because I was young, and that is where I had to stay. But I was made to feel uncomfortable living here. Ways that was basically, for example, in small towns, I'd often have people pointing, staring, saying, "Oh, why does she look like that?" People walking towards me, but they'd expect me to move off the pavement for them. If they were walking in a group, they'd say, "Why are you here?" I've been followed home in the area that I live now with people saying, "How can you afford to live here?" and assuming that I'm in the area to cause trouble. The same with my brother. He was once too afraid to continue walking home alone because he's constantly being followed by people who don't want to believe that we could live in that area. So just imagine in your own home not feeling comfortable in that one area that you should really feel safe. In shops, for example, I'm often followed around, or you can hear them on security speaking about you just because you've entered the shop, just like every other person. You haven't done anything suspicious. It's just the fact that you're in there and you look different. So they assume a suspicion and they subsume negative behavior just based on your skin color. I spoke about in the videos when I was held up against the wall when I was about 12 or 13 by an ununiformed security guard in Debenhams who assumed I stole something. And even when I said, "Look in my bag," he refused to look in my bag, but was still holding me up against the wall, grabbing my clothing. And all that happened with that was that he had to attend a meeting and write a letter of apology to me. And that was all. Nothing further happened. It was never addressed. And I was just given a Debenhams voucher. But that doesn't really address the real problem. And why would I even want to shop in a shop like that anymore that won't address the true issue? So giving me a voucher won't stop him from doing that again. It didn't address his behavior. Furthermore, in schools, I also spoke about this on the video, I had food thrown at me by younger school children saying, "Feed the African, feed the slave, like, why does she look like that? Let's try and rub the color of her skin." And although I was a lot older than them, still imagine how it makes you feel when a younger person is speaking to you like that, and then you go to the authoritative figure, which would be the head teacher at the time, but even so, they still don't do anything about it. All they did was not send the children on the trip. They never addressed the racism. They never addressed them saying, "Feed the African, feed the slave," or coming up to me trying to rub my skin to see if the color would change. They never addressed why that was wrong, and they simply gave the excuse that children in Devon at that particular school hadn't come across Black people. So it's that's not an acceptable excuse at all. So that's why education has been a fundamental goal for me and a fundamental thing I wish to pursue within my activism. So since the protest, I just want to highlight what we've achieved, just because a lot of people often say, what does protesting achieve? Why are you disturbing the world? People have said to me, why would you protest? She's an extremist. She's this. She needs to be dealt with, as in violently. I have security when I go to work now in Princess Hay just because of all the violence and physical abuse, mental abuse that I've faced just from organising the protest. But since the protest, I've been contacted by over 30 schools. I'm doing my 4th workshop on Tuesday at a school with over 100 pupils in a year group, which will be great. I'm working with schools to integrate Black history, conversations about diversity and multiculturalism within the curriculum. So not just for one lesson, because as I've said, there's no point just having one class where you speak about difference and that's it, because it needs to be an integrated thing so that we're not singled out. So that it's not, oh no, I have to go to that lesson because now I have to learn about this. It shouldn't be a choice. It's something that everyone needs to know about, and it needs to be considered in your thoughts as it is in other people's lives. It's something we have to think about every day. So why shouldn't you? That's what I've said. I'm now part of ITV's Diversity and Multiculturalism panel, which is really positive. I've done quite a lot of work with ITV with my videos and numerous articles. So it's great to be on a diversity and inclusion panel because I'll actually be able to challenge them. And they've openly come and said, what can we do? Come to the meetings and point out where we're going wrong and what more we can do in the future. I've written various articles for newspapers that Diane Abbott's wrote for and public reading rooms. I'm going to an international event in Berlin next year to speak as well on behalf of people from the UK, which is really good. So things are being achieved, especially in the educational front. But although a lot of things have been achieved, there's so much pressure on myself and other Black people at this time to educate, keep the movement going. For example, as soon as there isn't a protest or as soon as it seems like I'm not speaking out as much, everyone forgets that racism exists. But whether the media picks up on it or not, racism is still here. Not just racism, people being targeted for all differences. General equality needs to be addressed because people are being singled out for gender, sexuality, ethnicity. It's not just one thing. So it is a big fight, which I'm fighting for. But there's so much pressure on all of us activists and all of us that are different to now suddenly speak up when we've had to suppress all these feelings and all these emotions for years. I've had to ignore all these experiences and put them to the back of my mind because when I've tried to speak out before, no one's been willing to listen. No one's wanted to hear and no one's wanted to help make the change. So there is a lot of pressure on us now, and that's where being an ally is so important because it's not down to one individual who is different to make the change for the whole world. It needs to be different communities coming together because we're all fighting the same fight at the end of the day. It's not just one person against the world. It needs to be everyone coming together. So in terms of being an ally, the basic definition is just being there for someone, supporting them and helping them. But it seems like within this movement and so many other movements, saying you're an ally is so much easier than actually being an ally yourself. It's easier to say that you're an ally so that it looks good on paper for you, but then when I call upon you or when other people in need call upon you, you're nowhere to be seen. That isn't being an ally. There's a very big difference between performative activism versus what is actually helping. And it's so disheartening for all these people that have chosen and got the strength now, like myself, like many others, to speak out. But then the same people, the same 1,000 people that were at our protests, for example, where are you now? What have you done since you held your banner and took a few pictures for your Instagram and posted them with a nice hashtag BLM protest? What happened since then? it's gone to the back of your mind. Not everyone, but there are a lot of people I've seen that you came to take the photos and you might have clapped at a few things that I've said and you've told me, oh, I'm sorry this happened. But the next day, a few days later, a few months later, when someone says a racist comment, you're laughing at the joke. Or you're working in a company where you can see changes need to be made. You've got a position of power, you've got your privilege, but you don't want to do anything with that. All you want to do is use the movement to benefit your own social platform just to get a few likes. But getting a few likes doesn't change our lives. No matter how many likes I get on a post or shares on a video, it doesn't stop racism. It's not about likes. It's not about gaining a few followers. In fact, as I spoke about earlier, for me personally, being an Instagram influencer, I've got about 51,000 followers, but I lost so many followers from speaking out and from being an activist because people are bored of hearing about racism and they're bored of hearing about my experiences, and they thought that it would just be a black square and then they wouldn't have to hear about it again. They thought they could make one post about it and that's all that they had to do, but I'm still experiencing these things, so I will keep speaking out against it until I stop experiencing them, and that's what a lot of people have had to understand. So I just wanted to speak about what people could do maybe to be a better ally themselves, because some people aren't purposely not good allies, they just haven't understood what it truly means to me, to people of different ethnic minorities, to people of different genders and sexualities. They haven't understood what it means to be an ally to us. So firstly, I would say it's about listening and learning, but not expecting minority groups to educate you and put that burden on them to educate you. Because although we want you to listen to our experiences and learn about the injustices we face in our lives, when you learn that, it's not our responsibility to tell everyone about that. You've got a responsibility to do something with that information that you've been told. It's not our job to constantly come to you and remind you every single day of the struggles we face. It's not my job to post videos of police brutality. You shouldn't need to see another black person get killed for you to remember that racism occurs. Do you really think that every day when I go online, I want to see another person of the same skin color of me get killed? Do we need a constant reminder just so that you don't forget that it happens? It's very selfish to carry on just sharing these videos, but with no reasoning, with no comment, with no discussion. It would be okay if you were speaking about it and learning something, but just sharing about it and putting a sad face. Like, yes, it's sad. I know it's sad. It's happening to people of my race. It's happening to my family members. It's happening to me. I don't need to be reminded every day. So when you learn something, pass it on to other people. There's free resources online. You don't need to rely on that minority to constantly educate you themselves. But then the flip side of that is also that we want you to be able to ask us questions. You don't need to feel awkward or shamed. A lot of people, for example, cultural appropriation, a lot of people have said to me, is it okay if I'm white and I wear braids? Is it okay if I'm this and I do this? Like, I'd rather you ask the question than stay silent and not actually want to know anything about it. But you also need to realize the strain on our mental health to continuously speak out, especially when the pains have been so deeply buried inside us that now suddenly everyone wants to hear it. That's digging up a lot of trauma, which some people aren't always strong enough to keep speaking out against. It's also important to speak out and call people out when things are wrong, but don't speak over the Black voices. For example, in the Black Lives Matter movement, it's very important that Black individuals can lead the movement if they choose to do so. For example, there's a lot of groups which have been created by white individuals who want to be allies, which is absolutely great, and that's fine. But please ensure that you're there with us and that you promote the Black voices within the group and that you give the Black individuals a platform. also be prepared to work, because it's not something that there will be a change overnight. I know that it's going to be a battle, and I know that there'll be days where I'll feel like I'm going backwards and that there is no progress because of comments that I've seen on social media, like saying, oh, she's pretty for a black girl, why didn't she use her looks instead of her voice? Oh, I bet the media only share her things and are attached to her because she's so well spoken for a black girl. White supremacy will always win. She's an extremist. She needs to be killed. She's leading Devon like this. All these comments, I could take them, and that could make me really sad, and that could make me stop speaking out. But that would go against everything that I'm preaching. I need to use those comments to motivate me even further, because me speaking out, if that helps one person, that is worth hundreds of negative comments and death threats, which I've been receiving every day. Back to being an ally. Don't act like activism can wait. It's not something that you can say, oh, I'm not going to help now, but I'll help in a few weeks' time. As everyone here would have seen, the media has already moved on to something else, just like it does with everything. It's not just about moving on from the movement. When there's a story, and when there isn't, they'll move on. But racism is part of my life story. Being treated differently because of the way you look or because of the way you act is part of many people's everyday life, and it can't wait. Racism, you can't put a stop on racism and put that on hold for a bit. So don't put on hold your activism. Unless you can tell me that you can stop racism in the whole world for a bit, then fine, but you can't. So you need to be an activist now. You need to help now. And don't also, I'll go back to that point, which is so important, don't rely on the trauma of Black individuals and other minorities to make you want to act. You need to take a stand against injustice, take risks. It is scary, but it's not as scary as the experiences that we'll have to continue going through if you don't take a stand. Use your privilege. If you are in a power position in your job role, take a stand and say something, because your voice will be heard a lot easier. Use the privilege that you have in any way to educate. If you're a parent, speak to your children, have these conversations so that you aren't helping society with continuing racism. As I've said many times, racism is either from the home or in school. Those environments are the ones that especially allow racism to continue and for that environment to foster. So as a parent, it is your responsibility. As a friend, as a mother, as an ally, it's your responsibility to do all that you can so that the pressure of this doesn't fall solely on me, and so that the pressure doesn't fall on any other activists. But yeah, that's what I like to say.
You are
Thank you.
You are such a wonderful speaker, Maya. Honestly, like I just like sat
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah, and thank you for like sharing your experiences and also putting things into context for people. Yeah, so it would be great. I mean, I'm sure people have questions. If you do have a question, then feel free to private message me, and then I shall muffle up the question. So please feel free to do that. And I'm going to start off with one of my questions, if that's all right. And it was just something you said in your talk earlier today about there being that misconception that racism doesn't exist in Devon. And I just wanted to know, like, why do you think there is that misconception?
I think some people just don't want to admit to a problem, because as soon as you see the problem is there and you admit to it in your mind, you have, the average person has some sort of guilt of being part of that problem, and then that means you'd have to do something. And a lot of people don't want to do something because it doesn't affect them at all. So you don't want to address that it's there because it doesn't affect you. And a lot of people, they'll say that it's not there, but you know it's there deep down, but because it doesn't affect you, you don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
Because you can go about your everyday life, whether it's here or not. It's easier for you to just say, nah, it's not there, because you'll continue as you please anyway. I've spent so much of my time as an activist having to actually convince people, which is strange because normally when you're protesting, people understand why you're protesting. But in Devon, I've actually had to convince a lot of people that racism is even here in the first place, for them to even understand why I'm speaking about this. But I don't understand how anyone can think, why would someone make up all these horrible instances that we've had to go through? Why would a whole community feel the exact same way and all have similar experiences if it isn't here? So I think people just don't want to admit it because it doesn't affect them. Devon is majority white, so these issues that I face, for example, they aren't facing, so they don't need to admit it's there because it will never affect them.
Yeah. Do you think some people don't want to see like racism or to admit that it exists within their bubble or their kind of town, because they would have to then see how they've benefited from it, actually, like even if they're not, they don't see themselves as racist. I think maybe once you kind of admit that there is racism, you have to see kind of how you've benefited from it.
Yeah, and you have to see how you've played a part in it without even realizing, because a lot of people don't realize that, okay, that one time you laughed at that joke, you are compliant and complicit in that racist act. That one time that you didn't speak out when you heard something was wrong, that is racist. You are the same because you know something is wrong and you've allowed it to be wrong. You've laughed in agreement with what they've said to make someone feel uncomfortable because of their skin color or because of whatever difference there is. And especially in terms of white privilege, I've heard hundreds of times like, what, we have problems too. But it's not, no one's saying you don't have problems, but I'm just saying that your everyday life isn't affected and disadvantaged because of your skin color like mine. I don't need to prove that to you. You have more opportunity than me because of your skin color. These are facts. These are proven facts. But once you admit that, then you're realizing that you're part of that problem if you don't speak out against it. And as I said, a lot of people don't want to be actual allies. They don't want to be called upon. They don't want the pressure of having to speak out. So that's why they wouldn't admit that it's there in the first place.
Yeah, well, the arrogance as well. The arrogance of like asking you to convince them that something you're experiencing is real. It's like, that is white privilege in action, in my opinion. But like,
even with some schools, they've said, oh, like, could you put some facts in your speech just because that would help basically acknowledge and prove that it's there. Now, pardon? Why am I even coming in? Why if you really need me to put some figures and facts into the speech and presentation I'm doing to convince you and the pupils, it's already so far gone. I shouldn't have to put a statistic in for you to actually believe my experiences,
to make
which is shocking. But then again, those are the places that need to hear it most. So if you need a statistic, I'll give you one. I'll give you more than one, because you're the place that needs me to come in more than the other places. So that's what I would say to that, really.
Wow, thank you. I can see questions coming in already, so I'm going to just scroll up to the first one. Let's have a look. I've got someone saying Maia is amazing. Let's have a look. There we go. I'm not going to name people because this is being recorded and I don't have people's consent and I don't want to kind of step any boundaries. So, but just thank you for these questions. So the first one that came in was, thank you so much to Maia for taking the time to educate us all and tell us about their experience. And is there a way we could contribute financially to Black Lives Matter Exeter or to you, Maia, directly in order to support your activism?
Yeah, so what I'm hoping to do is set up a charity page or a GoFundMe, just so that it can allow us to raise the platform and allow more Black individuals opportunities to speak, opportunities to go to events and have their voices heard, because as government guidelines are relaxing, there's a lot more in-person opportunities, and there's a lot more we can do in terms of events, but I can set one up like after this and start with a GoFundMe, just because a charity is a bit a longer process. So I could set that up and then pass on the link, just because I want to give everyone the opportunity that I've had, because I know that I have certain privileges above other Black individuals. For example, my social media platform is a privilege in itself, because that's allowed me to promote my voice further, where there's some people that don't have that, and they don't have a way to reach out to as many people as I've had. So I just want to allow everyone to have that equal opportunity that I have. So that's really what we'd be spending the money on. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Maia. Another question that's come in is, how long have you been doing Black Lives Matter Exeter? Like, when did it? That movement start?
As an activist myself in Exeter, and speaking about Black Lives Matter, that was quite a few years ago, especially since that experience happened in school with the food throwing, because that's when I realised how important education was, and when I realised that nothing was being done to actually address racism. But BLM Exeter movement started like just before June, like early June, before we did the protest. The Facebook page is BLM Exeter movement. It has nearly 4,000 members, I think, now. So that's what we use, like a hub, basically, to post what's going on, what I'm doing, future events and everything.
Fabulous, thank you. I was going to ask, Maia, like, I was thinking about this today, about kind of, was there a moment where you, like a light bulb moment where you were like, I've got to do something about this, I want to speak out, I want to use my voice? Or was it something that was kind of, was it that definite? Was it even, do you even consider it a choice, or just kind of like a necessary part of your experience? How do you view your activism in that way?
For me, it's not a choice, because, for example, in Exeter, I don't know that many Black people, and the Black people that I do know don't want to speak out because of the consequences that it has. There are huge consequences that it has on you as an individual, you as a business, your safety. So for me, it was never an option. The school I went to, my brother and I were the only Black people there. So it was never an option, because who else would do it? So I always felt that I needed to do it. When I saw Sam had made an event, someone suggested that I get involved with that, and then we formed a partnership that way. But then aside from that, since then, I've just continued organising other protests across Devon. I've continued making videos, going to the media, writing articles, but there isn't really a choice, because I feel like if I don't do it, I don't want to rely on anyone else to make the future more safe for me. So I will speak out as much as I can for myself, for my family, for my friends, and just for the general Black community. I would do all that I can.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. Right, let me have a look at the chat bar. Let's have a look. Is there any practical support we could provide to Black Lives Matter Exeter?
In terms of like what kind of thing?
Well, I suppose people, I'm guessing, and this is the problem with Zoom, because you can't have a good old conversation.
Yeah.
Context, but I'm guessing, I'm going to scroll down just in case there's any context. But so for people that want to get involved, but they don't want to overstep the mark, or they don't know how to get involved practically, what would you say?
In terms of like supporting at events, there's always roles for people to be supporting and speaking, because if you're actually an ally, you're not overstepping the mark. For example, at the protest, people said to me, why are you letting white people speak? But I said, it's not a race war. It's not about, oh, I'm only going to let Black people speak. Of course, Black people and other minorities, they were put first. I made sure all of them got to speak, because that was their one time for them to have that platform. But there's no overstepping the mark. If you want to commit, like practically, and get involved, I would encourage that fully. I wouldn't say there's for me, you wouldn't be overstepping the mark if you're actually devoted to the cause. You wouldn't be overstepping. You can always message me like Maia Thomas on Facebook. But yeah, practically in terms of events, there's always roles that we would need help with, helping finding space, like studio space, because we record podcasts and host events, maybe even just looking for different areas that we could move into to do protests, because I know there's areas in Devon we haven't covered yet. Coming up with content for the group, for example, I have a lot of people who support the BLM Exeter group just by finding resources for people. Like, that's helpful. So just so that it's not all down to me to keep the momentum going. So yeah.
Great, thank you. It sounds like there's quite a few ways to get involved. That's brilliant. Let's have a look. Where am I? Okay, so many of us leave messages, videos in the Exeter Black Lives Matter Facebook group, which reach the already converted. How do we go about getting the messages to the masses?
Yeah, so this was an issue that I encountered at the start. Not really an issue, but kind of, because initially we wanted to create a safe space just like this is right now. Because at the start, a lot of Black people and other minorities didn't want to speak out because it wasn't safe for them to do so. So that's why we had to make the group private. The group was growing at a ridiculous rate after the protest. And although we have moderation in place, the wrong type of people were getting into the group, which made the core members, the Black people, not want to be part of the group. So that's why I had to make it private. But right now, I'm in the process of actually setting up a public group, because I understand you need to be able to share in and out of the group for it to reach a larger audience, which is what I've done. I've started sharing from my personal Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram because they're all public profiles. But once the public group's set up, I'll post that into the BLM Exeter movement group. And then those that feel safe to be in a public space can do so. But I just wanted to ensure that there was the option for the members that it was created for to make sure that they actually felt safe posting their experiences, because if they didn't, then there would be no point in the group in the first place. So that's really how to do it. Also, for yourself, if you've Facebook, even if it's down to your friends will be able to share that post, and that will reach a whole group of other people which may not be converted. So even posting on your own profiles, your own views, you may think it's only reaching your maybe 200 friends, but if your 200 friends, if one of them has 500 friends and they share it, that's another 500 people. So it's like that, really.
Thank you for that. And it sounds, when you were talking, it almost sounds like a bit of a compromise of, not a compromise, but a balance between creating safe spaces and then spreading the message. And sometimes they will overlap. And yeah, that must be.
It is really hard, because from the beginning, so many people spoke up and so many people got involved because they felt that it was safe to do so. And people will only continue to speak up if they feel that it's safe. As soon as, for example, I could have stopped because my safety has actually been in danger because of this, and a lot of people would stop, but I don't want to put other people in that position. So that's why we had to make the choice at the time. That was the right thing to do for the members of the group at the time. But now we can easily branch out, and the right people will come across to the public group, the people that really support the movement. People have said, oh, but you've made one group with 4,000 members. What if only half come across? But if the half that do come across, if they're the true supporters and they're the people that really are committed to the cause, I'd rather have half the number than a whole number just to get numbers up. It's more about the type of person and what they're willing to do and what action they're willing to take than just the number on the screen.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've got a comment. Yes, allowing racism to go unchecked is part of being racist. I think some people don't see that they are being racist. Some people don't see that they are racist, which is a problem. Some great comments here. How do you as a white person call upon other Black people's experiences of racism to help you make your case? Is that situation even okay?
What do you mean, like how do you just ask Black people about their experiences? Is that the question?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Let me have a look. How do you So how does this person, as a white person, call upon other Black people's experiences of racism to help them make their case? So, like, I suppose, so if if a white person is challenging racism, but they kind of, I guess, they want to use an experience of a Black person, or, like, I guess it's that kind of crossing the line, maybe. Like, how do you do it without talking for a community? How do you do it without, like, for Black people?
Oh, okay. But I feel like everyone knows the difference between right and wrong, for example. So say someone is being racist or someone says a racist joke, you don't, if I'm understanding the question correctly, you don't exactly need to mention Black people or an experience of a specific Black person. It's just the act that is racist and that is wrong. Black or white, whatever color you are, you know that is wrong. So you can speak out for it. If you, just in terms of racism, everyone's aware of what is racist and what isn't racist when you're a certain age. So you don't always have to call upon experiences. And I personally wouldn't be offended if someone said a racist joke and before I had a chance to answer, a white person said, no, that's wrong. That's actually really encouraging.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have a problem with someone stepping in and saying something, because at the end of the day, even if I'm not the person that's affected, for example, if it was a joke against someone of a different race to myself, I still know it's racist. So I would still point it out whether I am that race or not. So I wouldn't get offended or mind. There wouldn't be really a boundary to overstep in that way. But if it's in terms of, for example, like cultural appropriation debates, that's all I can think of, because that's quite topical and that's where it normally is, where some, for example, braids or hairstyles, a lot of white people will say to other people, white people, oh, that's not fine. But that's more of a tricky area, because it's not really, it depends on the Black person whether they'll be offended. I know a lot of Black people who would be offended if a white person wore braids, and I know a lot of Black people that wouldn't be offended. So things like that I would probably leave down to the Black person, because that's not being intentionally racist. For example, if you saw a picture of someone posting of just a white person in braids, they're not going out to say a racist comment to me because I'm Black. They just might not be educated on why it's wrong to have that hairstyle. So in terms of that, I would choose to educate rather than just call them out and go for the, like, oh, this is wrong because of this. Maybe go for the route of education, which you can find online and through other resources, rather than just trying to call them out and make them feel bad, because everyone doesn't always do things with bad intentions, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. Right, let's scroll down. I'm really enjoying my speech. I think it's really interesting. Okay, one question we've got. What do you say to people who say, I don't see colour?
Oh, yeah, I personally that comment is not one that I need to hear, because you do. So just own the fact that you do. No one is offended that you see me as a different color. I see that your top is Black. I see that. And I see that other person's top is red. That is just going too deep into the wrong issue. So people that say that, I would really say just own that you do, but don't treat someone differently because of it. That's the main thing. You can see difference. Everyone sees different. I see that your hair is different to mine. I see you're eating a different meal to me. That's fine, but don't treat someone differently because of it. Don't make them feel uncomfortable because of that. That's what the actual issue is. It's not the issue that there is difference and that you don't see it, because we know you do. It's even worse when you say that you don't, because it's kind of like you're ignorant to the actual problems that are going on just by saying, oh, everyone's the same, I don't see color. That's very idealistic, because everyone isn't the same.
Yeah.
Everyone is different, and we should celebrate the differences. You saying I don't see color is just trying to class everyone all in one box, but we're not. The whole point is that everyone's different, but they don't deserve to be treated differently because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think I hear that a lot within my work. Obviously, I'm not comparing sort of our experiences, and it really always pisses me off, that one, because I'm just like, it's just it's horrible, and it's just kind of like, it's someone trying to be kind of right on and like, I don't see color, everyone's the same, and actually it's like, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people say that not with bad intentions at all.
Yeah, totally.
But it leads you to automatically, in our mind, become someone that you wouldn't really see that person as an ally either, because you're ignoring the obvious. We don't want you to ignore the obvious points that are there. Like, we need to address them and address the reason why, oh, we're different, but why do you feel the need to treat me differently because of that? It's not about just ignoring it and trying to live in this idealistic world, because that's not reality.
No, sure. No, thank you, Maia. Let's have a look. Will there be more marches and protests in the future to kind of get involved with?
Yeah, definitely. So for a while, just because of government guidelines and then spike up, spike down, like all of that, we just said, oh, we'll focus on doing online events. I also wanted to focus on the groundwork for education and going into schools, because obviously that starts in September. So after the protest, I really focused all my energy on all the schools to ensure that I can go into them. But hopefully late September will be the next one. I hope so. But it will be up to date on my social media and on the BLM Exeter movement group as well.
Fantastic. That's great. How do I find and join BLM Exeter? I wonder if one of the moderators wouldn't mind.
I can put links. So
is that all right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would be brilliant.
I'll do that in a second.
Fab. How do you handle having friends not engage with you on the topic of fighting racism? I sometimes find it hard that some close friends avoid the topic altogether.
Yeah, that's been really interesting, because there's people that I considered best friends before this that have not once said or engaged in anything at all.
Wow.
But I guess in my mind, I've just had to separate friendships, because at the end of the day, I'm not here to like only convert my friends. I need to focus on the wider society influence than just my friends. Like, although it is hard, I don't want to put all my energy into trying to speak to my friends when there's a whole world out there that needs educating more than that one person. So I'm not saying I'm not friends of them anymore, but I'm just not devoting all of my time to that group of friends that were there for me, because this just shows this is when I've needed you most in my whole life, probably. And you're completely silent.
Wow.
So in my head, I've just left that really and focused on the bigger picture, because I could spend ages trying to convince my best friend just because I still want to stay friends with them, and not actually put myself to use and continue with the work that I'm doing in schools and in society. So for me personally, it's just had to be like, this has been a clear out. As in, I don't have time to say, oh, but that person was my best friend, so I'm going to devote this day to try and convince them. I don't have time to do that. So I've just had to be careful with my time, be careful with your own mental state, because if you're trying to, when it's friendships as well, there's the personal attachment. So you would devote yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, all into that one person. That is so draining. I tried to do that at the start, but then I realized I'll burn out if I'm just focusing on my friends. So I focus on the bigger picture. If they come across what I'm doing, one thing, they might see it and it might change their mind. but I'm not personally going to any person in particular and devoting too much time or too much energy on that one person.
Great, good for you. It sounds like you kind of like have the tools to really look after yourself, which I guess not everyone can do, you know? It must be really, really difficult. What do you think needs to change in order for society to start genuinely celebrating difference? That's a big question.
For example, the government, though, because I can be doing all that I'm doing, activists can be doing all that they're doing, whatever they're activists for, anything within equality, for example. But then, for example, when Boris Johnson says, oh, everyone needs to stop being wet and we need to stop trying to brush aside our history, when that's the only comment the government has made, that just ruins all the work that we've all put in. A lot of people, especially people that are against Black Lives Matter, they look to the government. People that are against all these different groups, people fighting for climate change, whatever, they look to the government as a figurehead. So until the government comes out with a statement, until the government, for example, says it's compulsory that schools have to do this, until they come out with a hard line against racism themselves, that is what really needs to be done. The government, huge businesses with big platforms, because there's only so much that I can do, for example. Also, it's about, I found, especially within Black Lives Matter, like connecting with different Black Lives Matter community leaders so that it's not just me. Like I'm in contact with BLM, like London, BLM, Bristol, all these organisers. So as a group, we can go and challenge bigger institutions and bigger areas than just doing protests in our area. But I really think the government, for example, that's a huge figure that needs to take a stand.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone said, not seeing colour, denial, or wanted to be accepted. Yes, idealistic.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got another question. Sorry if this has been asked before, but before I joined, but this is a question from someone in my family. As an educator and a white person, if I educate my class on Black Lives Matter, I think this question has been asked before. Is it okay if I mention experiences of my black friends told me with their permission? I think you answered that one, didn't you?
Kind of, but I'll just say one thing.
Please do, yeah.
For example, because the government and councils have a big say in curriculums of schools, you'd also have to check with the school that you're actually allowed to do that. It sounds weird, but there's a lot of regulations around what you're allowed to say. And then obviously, as long as you've got permission from the person as well, I think that would be okay. What I've had to do with some schools is they just wanted no names, like anonymous experiences, just like storytelling, basically, or for example, when you mentioned something in history, rather than being like, I know this person, this happened to this person, this happened in Exeter here on this date, blah, blah, blah. Just say it as a collective of experiences that way, as long as it fits in with when you've checked with the school. That's what I found as a way to get around it and as something that schools have accepted rather than listing particular individuals' experiences.
Yeah, great point. We were talking about activism. Well, we've talked about it a lot this week, but there was a session we ran and we were talking about the definition of activism and what it could look like. And someone asked, does activism always need to be in person on the streets? So
No, 100% no, because some of the people that have been the most active, especially for me in the BLM movement, are people that weren't able to attend the protest because of shielding, but their work online is huge. Sharing resources online, speaking to family and friends, educating themselves to then go and share that to a wider platform. It's not just about protest. That's why a lot of people keep saying to me, when's the next protest? But I was saying, the groundwork comes from a lot more than protests. For example, with schools, if I just continued doing protests and didn't approach schools and didn't respond to schools contacting me, those are where the real changes are happening as well. So activism can be online, because you don't have to campaign in person. You could be sending emails out to your local council, to different businesses, challenging them, calling out your own business. You don't need to be there necessarily with a sign, because a lot of people that did turn up to the protest, they aren't activists. They want to label themselves as an activist because they went to one protest and they held up a sign and they said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry for your experience," but that's not being an activist. So you definitely don't have to do it in person as well, I would say.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm not going to get through all these questions. I'm really sorry. We've got 1 minute left. I'm gonna, maybe we'll do, how, Maia, are you happy if we do little speed questions? So kind of like really quick answers. Would you, is that all right?
Yeah.
Would you,
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll see if there are any ones that kind of, I just want to,
that's fine, don't worry.
I feel bad for people. Right. Let's have a look. I think some of these have been answered. Oh no, I think we're okay. How do we educate kids in schools? No, I think a lot of this has been answered. And just kind of messages, just saying how inspirational you are, and
thank you,
and how much people are learning, which I think is great. And I think, I think, for me, it's important to say, like, I don't want this to be the end of this conversation. It's all very well us putting on Totnes Pride online, and but actually, I mean, and we've been talking about continuing this in ways. So if you do have questions, obviously, Maia's a big star, so you can get in touch with Maia and follow Maia's work. But
I'll put my contact details and the Facebook group in the chat now. I'll literally just type it out for everyone.
That's great. Just people saying thank you so much. Thank you for being involved in this. I'm going to finish questions there. I kind of feel bad for not getting through them all, but there were so many questions, and I think that just goes to show, how you speak to people and how you kind of ignite people's passions and people's curiosities of wanting to get involved and to make meaningful action. So on behalf of everyone, Maia, I really want to say a massive thank you. It's been such a pleasure to work with you today, and
thank you.
I get it all together, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Me too.
Yeah, great. Fab. Did you want to say, I don't want to have the last word, Maia, do you want to say anything to finish off?
Yeah, what does that say? Please set up
please set up a GoFundMe. That's what someone's saying. Set up a GoFundMe so people can support you or BLM Exeter.
Okay, well, I'll do that after as well. But I just wanted to say thank you for listening and taking the time to listen to my experiences, and hopefully you can take something away, share it with your friends and families. Feel free to share my experiences because I'm speaking about them publicly. And if you have any questions or want to get involved in any other ways, just message me, because I'm happy to have as many people involved as they want to be, as involved as they want to be. But just continue to be allies to people that you can. Continue to be mindful of how this is a difficult time for many Black and other minorities and anyone that is different going through these battles of inequality right now, because there's a lot of mental strain on them. And to anyone else that is an activist, just remember to take care of yourself and anyone else who's feeling pressures at this time as well. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Maia. I just want to read some of the comments before we go, because thank you for tonight. Thank you, Maia. Proud of you. Great idea. Thank you. So very inspirational. Fantastic. And thank you to our moderators, Dot and Ange and Max. And a big thank you to Emily and Kitty for providing BSL this evening. Thank you, everyone. We're going to log off now. Have a lovely night. And if we can have a big virtual round of applause, because we can't have a proper one, so we'll have a virtual one. So feel free to clap now. And hopefully, look, you can see the claps. You can see the clap. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Maia. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.